You ever wake up to a sound so wrong it makes your chest hurt? That was me, last Thursday, when I heard a metallic smash followed by the strangest silence you can imagine. Not the calm after an accident, mind you, the kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something awful. I staggered outside, slippers slapping the wet pavement, and there it was, my 1968 Mustang, the one car I'd babied for decades, now a crumpled heap of chrome and paint, smelling like burnt rubber and betrayal. And leaning against it, hands in pockets, grinning like he just won a lottery. My grandson, Alex. Grandpa. Well, it was, you know, he tried to look sheepish, but it came out like a rehearsed line in a bad movie. I blinked. You what? I mean, it's your fault. You shouldn't have let me drive. I swear, the blood drained from my head, and my knees nearly buckled. There's a special brand of horror when your own flesh and blood not only ruins something precious but also tries to make you the villain. I called my daughter, Marcy. She's the type who drapes concern over every conversation like expensive silk, while secretly maneuvering like a chess master in Prada heels. She arrived in 30 minutes, perfectly coiffed, smelling faintly of expensive coffee and subtle judgment. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, brushing her hand over the Mustang's hood. "Are you okay?" But there was a gleam in her eyes, the one that said she was already thinking about how to spin this into a story where I was incompetent, frail, maybe even dangerous. And Alex? He just shrugged. "It's fine, Grandpa. You'll get over it." I stared at him. I really stared. That kid, my blood, had crossed a line. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't about the car. It was about control. About taking what I had, my reputation, my autonomy, maybe even my home, and slowly eroding it under the guise of youthful recklessness. As they left, Marcy promising to handle the insurance, code 4, manipulate every angle, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'm older now, yes. A little creaky. Maybe my memory isn't perfect. But there's one thing still intact, my mind. And I started thinking, very quietly, about a way to remind them that underestimating me is a dangerous mistake. I didn't know it yet, but this crash wasn't just a car accident. It was the opening move in a long, twisted game. And I was about to play like I had nothing to lose, and everything to win. The thing is, revenge doesn't announce itself. It creeps, it whispers, it grows. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would already be too late. So, the first thing I learned about dealing with Marcy and Alex: never, ever underestimate their ability to make the mundane feel like a death sentence. I called the insurance company myself, because, apparently, I have to personally fight for my own life now, and got passed through 4 layers of hold music, elevator chimes, and robotic apologies before I finally reached someone who could tell me what I already suspected. Alex had reported the crash as my fault. Not, "Your grandson was driving without permission," or "minor accident by a minor." Oh no. It was framed in Technicolor: "Elderly driver loses control, endangers child." I swear I heard the echo of Marcy's voice laughing somewhere in the background. I tried to reason with them, explaining that I hadn't even been in the car. The agent was polite, sympathetic even, but there's only so much a robot of a human can do when confronted with a paper trail that says, "culpable elderly male." So I did what anyone in their right mind, or in my case, slightly unhinged but cunning mind, would do. I started digging. Old phone records, timestamps, GPS data, witness statements. The local gas station clerk remembered Alex picking up a pack of gum at 2:13 p.m., long after the crash supposedly happened. And security cameras? Priceless. One grainy but damning clip showing a tiny silhouette behind the wheel, not me. That night, I sat in my living room, the house smelling faintly of burnt toast. I may have left something on the stove in my distracted state, poring over everything. Each piece of evidence made the manipulation clearer. Marcy was pushing Alex, probably under the guise of teaching responsibility, while actively eroding my credibility. And then, the strangest thing happened. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Careful. Not everyone sees things clearly. I laughed. Nervously. I have to admit it. Maybe it was a prank, maybe a warning. Either way, it was a reminder that this wasn't just a domestic squabble anymore. It was creeping into something darker, something deliberate. I called my lawyer the next morning. Not the greedy type Marcy would hire to sweep evidence under the rug. I called someone meticulous, someone who could sniff out manipulation and spot a legal trap from 50 miles away. And as I left the house, locking the creaking door behind me, I realized one thing: they thought this was a simple accusation, a small victory. They had no idea how long I could wait, how quietly I could plan, or how sharp my memory really was. And Alex? I could almost hear him laughing in his room that night, thinking he'd won. Little did he know, the first move in my countergame had already begun. You know that feeling when someone smiles at you, but the smile doesn't reach their eyes? That was Marcy, standing in my kitchen the morning after I filed the first wave of evidence with my lawyer. She was holding a mug of coffee like it was a peace offering, all warm steam and casual concern. "Dad, are you sure you don't want me to handle this?" she asked, tilting her head, voice syrupy sweet. "You know, I could just talk to Alex. Make him understand what's at stake." I looked at her. Really looked. And there it was, the tiny twitch in her jaw, the subtle lift of her eyebrows that screamed, "I know more than I'm letting on." She wasn't trying to help. She was trying to control. She wanted me out of the way. "You mean, manipulate him further?" I asked. Too sharp, perhaps. But I needed her to know I was seeing through the mask. "Oh, Dad, don't be dramatic." She laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that carries sugar on the surface but venom underneath. "I just want to protect the family." Right. Protect the family. Translation: protect herself, protect Alex, and make sure I looked like a doddering old fool who couldn't even remember which side of the road to drive on. I nodded, letting her think she had some control. That's when I realized, the key to revenge isn't brute force. It's patience. Observation. Waiting for them to reveal themselves by their own arrogance. I started small. I let Alex see me in the garage, quietly examining the Mustang's crushed frame, taking pictures, jotting notes. Subtle, innocuous. But I knew he was watching, because kids always do. And Marcy, well, she couldn't help but hover. That evening, I found a note slipped under my door. In Marcy's unmistakable handwriting. "Be careful. You're walking a dangerous line. Remember, we're family." Family. Funny word, isn't it? Sometimes it's a shield, sometimes a weapon. And in this house, it was slowly turning into both. As I read the note, I felt a strange thrill. Not fear. Excitement. Because now I had confirmation, they were worried. My little moves were already making ripples. But there was more. Something I didn't know yet. Something about Alex's behavior that didn't fit the script Marcy was writing. He wasn't just a puppet. Maybe he was being pushed, or maybe he had his own reasons. Either way, the game was about to get more complicated. And that's when I heard the first knock at the door. Slow. Deliberate. Not Alex. Not Marcy. Someone else. And the shadow outside wasn't friendly. The knock was slow, deliberate, like someone trying to test my patience, or my fear. I froze, mid-breath, listening to the echo bounce off the hallway walls. The clock ticked in the background, each second stretching, taut and electric. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see a man in a wrinkled suit. Early 40s, pale skin, eyes sharp and calculating. Not a neighbor. Not a delivery guy. Definitely not here for small talk. "Mr. Harris," he said, voice smooth, rehearsed. "I'm a concerned party regarding recent events involving your grandson." I blinked. Concerned party? That's a polite way of saying lawyer, debt collector, or lunatic. Which is it? He smiled faintly. Too faint. Maybe all three. But mostly, a friend. "I have information that might interest you, about Alex, and about what's really going on in your family." I leaned against the doorframe, intrigued despite myself. This was either a setup or a lifeline. Either way, I wasn't about to close the door. "You have 10 minutes, I said, voice calm. "Then you leave, or I call the police." We moved inside. He handed me a folder, thick with printouts, texts, emails, a few grainy photographs of Alex meeting someone in the park late at night. The kind of thing that made you pause and reevaluate everything you thought you knew. Your grandson is being influenced, the man said quietly. Someone's planting ideas, maybe even manipulating him. And your daughter, she's not as innocent as she pretends. I flipped through the folder, the smell of printer ink sharp in my nose. Everything fit into a pattern I hadn't consciously noticed yet, subtle nudges, carefully timed incidents, whispers that could ruin reputations. And then, at the very bottom, a note written in childish handwriting, Alex's handwriting, but not signed by him. Grandpa, I'm scared. Help me. I felt my chest tighten. This was no longer just about the car. This was about control, trust, and the invisible strings being pulled behind my back. The stranger looked at me, eyes steady. I can help you. But you have to act carefully. They're watching. And right then, I realized something crucial: revenge isn't just about striking back. Sometimes it's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. I nodded slowly. Then we start quietly. One move at a time. And they won't see it coming. The stranger left, but not before slipping an envelope under the door, a USB drive. No note, no instructions, just the weight of possibility. That night, I sat in the dim light of my living room, the Mustang looming silently in the garage, the USB drive blinking faintly in my hand. And I knew, the real game had begun. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, like a warning. But inside, my mind was sharp, ready, and already 3 steps ahead. I stared at the USB drive like it was some alien artifact. Small, black, innocuous, but I knew better. Sometimes the tiniest things carry the heaviest truths. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands trembling just a little, not from fear, but from anticipation. Files. Hundreds of them. Photos, videos, text transcripts, emails. The first thing I noticed, a series of messages between Alex and someone named M. Someone patient, persuasive, guiding him, nudging him. Some messages even suggested the crash could be a perfect opportunity to destabilize me. Perfect opportunity. My grandson, being coached. My blood ran cold. Then I saw it. Video clips, short and grainy, taken in the park, at the mall, even in the driveway. Alex meeting with, not Marcy. Someone else. Someone shadowy. I paused on one clip, Alex holding a notebook, whispering into the phone, eyes darting nervously. Whoever M was, they had him wrapped in some invisible web. And then there were the emails. Signed, but never sent, from Marcy to someone with a Gmail address I didn't recognize. Lines like, "Make sure he doesn't realize until it's too late. He trusts us too much. We'll handle Grandpa's reaction." It hit me like a punch to the gut. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, plotting behind my back. This wasn't just about control. It was about eradication of my credibility, my memory, maybe even my independence. I sat back in my chair, listening to the old clock tick, feeling the faint hum of the laptop fan. And then, a tiny, ironic smile crept across my face. Perfect. If they thought they were clever, well, I've got patience. And patience, combined with careful observation, can be lethal. The first step was simple: knowledge. They think they know me, but they haven't seen me operate when cornered. Every message, every video, every seemingly small act of manipulation was now catalogued. And that meant I had leverage. But there was a problem. I couldn't move too quickly. They're vigilant, always watching. Even Alex. I had to let them reveal more, dig themselves deeper. And that meant pretending to be weaker than I was. Frustrating, yes, but deliciously strategic. That night, I left the Mustang's garage light on, the shadows dancing across the crumpled hood. I imagined Marcy peering through the curtains, confident that she had me figured out. She didn't. Not yet. And Alex, well, I had a feeling he wasn't the mastermind here. Just a boy caught in a trap bigger than him. And maybe, just maybe, I could save him before he realized the full cost of obedience. The plan was forming. Slow. Methodical. Brutal in its precision. And like a chessboard stretching across the family, each move had consequences I could predict, but they couldn't. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the old windows. A sound that, over the years, had always unsettled me. But tonight, it sounded like applause. I woke up the next morning to the faint hiss of the kettle, the smell of weak coffee seeping through the kitchen. Routine, mundane, comforting. Perfect for hiding what I was about to do. Because the real work isn't flashy. It's quiet, surgical, invisible until it's too late. First, I needed to test the waters. Who was loyal, who was cautious, and who was a puppet of Marcy? So, I staged something small. A minor, memory lapse. Left the keys to the Mustang on the counter, right where Alex could see them. Nothing obvious, just a test. Sure enough, by midday, there was a soft knock on my door. Alex, looking guilty, hovering like a child caught sneaking cookies. "Grandpa, maybe I shouldn't," he started. I cut him off gently. "Alex, go ahead. Take the keys. But remember, I'll be watching." His eyes widened, the tiniest flicker of fear, or was it respect, crossing his face. He hesitated, and then slowly reached for them. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He's not a villain. He's being steered. And the more I nudged, the more I could reveal who the real puppeteer was. Next, I played a subtle game with Marcy. Left a carefully worded note on the kitchen table. "I've been going through old documents. Some things might need clarification before legal steps. Let's review them together." Her reaction. Classic. A flurry of texts, fake sweetness over the phone, scheduling a review she thought was about me being forgetful. In reality, it was about baiting her. Let her slip, let her overreach. And then there was the phone call from M, the shadowy figure from the USB. He offered nothing concrete, just an observation. "They are impatient. They'll make mistakes if you watch carefully." Perfect. Patience is my weapon. And I had a small arsenal, the evidence on the USB, subtle tests, and the advantage of surprise. That night, I sat in the garage, flashlight illuminating the Mustang's crumpled frame. I imagined the eventual confrontation, step by step. How every overreach by Marcy would be catalogued, every whisper and manipulation recorded. And somewhere deep down, a dark thrill ran through me. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought an old man, a little creaky and forgetful, could be cornered. They were wrong. Because while they played their reckless game, I was setting traps they didn't even know existed. The first trap, I realized, wasn't legal, or even psychological. It was emotional. And the first person to fall into it might just be Alex. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows again, like a reminder that everything in this house has ears, and eyes. By the third week, the tension in the house was almost tangible. You could cut it with a butter knife, thick and sticky like molasses. And I watched, quietly, as the first cracks appeared in Marcy's carefully constructed mask. It started small. A slip of the tongue during a phone call. A text sent to the wrong contact. Little things, insignificant on their own, but in a house built on manipulation, mistakes are like dynamite. I noticed Alex pacing one evening in the living room, staring at his phone like he was seeing ghosts. "Everything okay, kiddo?" I asked, voice soft, deliberately casual. He hesitated, then muttered, I don't know if what I'm doing is right." Bingo. First crack. I didn't push, didn't prod. I let him stew. Let him wrestle with the guilt, with the confusion. Because guilt is a weapon, subtle, surgical, and deadly effective when aimed carefully. Meanwhile, Marcy started showing signs of impatience. The fake sweetness slipped. Snippets of irritation leaked into her voice. I left files casually on the table, strategically misplaced, enough for her to see that I was digging deeper. "Oh, Dad, you really shouldn't look through all this paperwork," she said one morning, attempting to reassert control. I smiled innocently. "Just keeping track. Don't want anything slipping through the cracks." Her jaw tightened. That's when I knew she had underestimated me. The first mistake in her plan. The domino was set. Then came the most delicious moment, Alex, sitting on my porch late at night, whispering, "I think Mom's. I think she's using me." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, letting him reach the realization himself. Nothing changes someone's trajectory like the stark clarity of truth hitting their conscience. And in the background, I could almost hear Marcy pacing in her bedroom, restless, frustrated, unaware that her own moves were being anticipated, documented, and catalogued for the moment they would matter most. By the time I went to bed that night, I had a plan forming: subtle manipulation, careful nudges, and the creation of small crises that would make her overreach. And once she did, well, her own hands would tie the noose. The Mustang sat in the garage, quiet, a reminder of the initial spark. And I smiled at the irony: what began as destruction would now be the stage for their unraveling. Outside, the wind whispered through the cracks in the old windows, a prelude to the storm I was quietly orchestrating. It happened exactly the way I suspected. Marcy couldn't resist the lure of control. By the fourth week, she was making bold moves, thinking I wouldn't notice, texting lawyers in my name, calling the insurance company pretending to be me, even showing up at the garage without warning. Each action was reckless, a perfect opening for the consequences I'd been quietly setting in motion. I let her. Every move, every little overstep, I documented. Photos of her handling paperwork I wasn't supposed to touch. Audio recordings of her coaching Alex on how to tell the story, if anyone asked. Everything was gold. And Alex, he was changing too. Quietly, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The boy who once tried to blame me for everything was now hesitant around his mother, questioning her instructions, confiding in me in hushed tones. "Grandpa. I think she's lying." I nodded, pretending to be surprised, delighted even. "Really? That's interesting." He leaned in, whispering, "I don't want to get in trouble, but I want to do the right thing." I didn't respond directly. I let him feel the weight of his choices. Let him grapple with the moral complexity he'd been shielded from by Marcy's carefully constructed narrative. The child was waking up, slowly, painfully, to the truth. Meanwhile, Marcy's impatience grew. She stormed through the kitchen one evening, throwing folders onto the table. "Dad! You can't just sit here and do nothing. You're going to ruin everything." I looked at her, calm as a winter lake. "Ruining what, Marcy? What exactly am I ruining?" Her face twisted, frustration spilling over. She had underestimated the old man's patience, underestimated the quiet mind that had been quietly cataloging, observing, and planning. She didn't realize that her own mistakes were being turned against her. By the time she left the room, I had the beginnings of a strategy that would force her to expose herself even further. It wouldn't be direct confrontation. No shouting, no accusations. Just carefully orchestrated setups, legal precision, and moral pressure. And Alex? He was my secret weapon. Guided subtly, protected from her manipulation, aware that for the first time, someone in the house was truly on his side. That night, I sat in the garage, Mustang looming silently behind me, listening to the creak of the old house settling. And I smiled, thinking how predictable humans are when they think they have all the power. Because the higher they climbed, the harder the fall. By this point, the tension in the house had become almost unbearable, like walking on a tightrope over a pit of vipers, except the vipers wore Prada and sneakers. Marcy was losing her cool, and I was enjoying every second of it. Not because I'm cruel, well, maybe a little, but because the game was unfolding exactly as I predicted. I filed a formal dispute with the insurance company, attaching the GPS data, timestamps, witness statements, and the grainy security footage. I didn't just present facts, I presented a narrative that left no room for interpretation. Alex was driving, I was not. The folder on my laptop had been polished, annotated, cross-referenced. Even the most aggressive adjuster would think twice before denying it. And then came the subtle moves with the legal system. I requested a temporary guardianship review, not to take Alex away, but to force a neutral party into observing the family dynamics. It was a small bureaucratic step, but it meant Marcy had to justify herself under official scrutiny. That's when I noticed the first sign of panic. Marcy started making frantic calls late at night, pacing, muttering under her breath. I left a deliberately forgotten notebook on the counter, showing timelines and inconsistencies she'd left in her own emails. She saw it immediately. Her face drained of color. Alex, who had been watching quietly, whispered, "Grandpa, she's really scared." I nodded. Exactly. That's the point. Fear makes people sloppy. And sloppy is useful. I began planting more subtle psychological traps, leaving small hints that her overreach had been noticed, arranging documents so that she would stumble across evidence of her own manipulation, letting Alex witness her nervous behavior. Each move was designed to escalate her panic while keeping my hands clean. That night, I heard a knock at the door again. Not Alex, not Marcy. A lawyer, one I hadn't contacted. Someone neutral, slightly intimidating, with sharp eyes. "You filed some interesting documents," he said, flipping through the folder I'd prepared. "Marcy's claims, they're looking thin. If she doesn't watch herself, she's going to make a mess for herself." I smiled. Funny, isn't it? How those who think they're clever often trip over their own schemes. As he left, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The first layer of my revenge was working. Marcy was unraveling, Alex was slowly aligning with me, and the law, boring, slow, and bureaucratic, was my unwitting ally. The game had entered its next stage, psychological warfare backed by legal precision. And I had all the pieces in place. Outside, the night was still, the wind a gentle hiss against the windows. But inside, the storm was only beginning. By now, Marcy was in full-blown panic mode. You could see it in the tremor of her hands, hear it in the clipped edge of her voice, smell it in the faint perfume she'd douse on herself to stay calm. But calm was gone. Every subtle trap I'd laid, the misplaced documents, the strategically timed phone calls from neutral lawyers, the hints I let Alex overhear, was pushing her closer to a breaking point. It happened one afternoon. She stormed into the kitchen, slamming a folder onto the counter. "Dad! This isn't fair. You're twisting everything," she shouted. I looked up from my tea, calm as a monk in a hurricane. "Twisting? I'm just organizing facts. Timelines. Evidence." Her eyes flickered with panic, and that's when I knew, the first domino was falling. In her frustration, she revealed more than she intended. An offhand comment about an unfiled email, a phrase about making sure Grandpa never notices, details that confirmed everything I suspected. Alex, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, whispered, "Grandpa. I think she's going to mess up." I nodded slowly. "Yes, she is. And when she does, you'll see the truth more clearly." It was beautiful, in a quiet, terrible way. I let her rage simmer while I silently documented every misstep. Every uncontrolled gesture, every slip of her tongue, it was ammunition, all stored neatly in my mind and on paper. Later, I met with Alex in the garage, the Mustang looming like a silent witness. "You don't have to follow everything she says," I told him gently. "You can think for yourself. And you can tell the truth, even if it's scary." He nodded, hesitant, but I could see the spark of understanding. The boy was waking up, slowly, and I was guiding him toward clarity without him even realizing it. Meanwhile, Marcy's overreach would soon backfire in a way she never expected. I just had to let her continue, letting her weave her own trap, step by step. That night, I sat in the dim light of my study, files neatly stacked, a cup of coffee cooling beside me. The first domino had fallen. Others would follow. And the house, once calm and mundane, now vibrated with the tension of secrets about to surface. Outside, the wind rattled the windows again, whispering promises of chaos. And I welcomed it. By the 5th week, Marcy was unraveling faster than I could have hoped. The perfect storm of psychological pressure, bureaucratic nudges, and subtle traps I'd laid was hitting her from all sides. And I was calm, deliberate, savoring each moment like a conductor watching the orchestra reach its crescendo. I started extending my influence beyond the house. A few calls to the insurance company, politely clarifying minor inconsistencies in their reports, nudged them to review Marcy's statements more closely. A brief chat with Alex's school counselor, framed as concern for his stress levels, planted seeds of doubt about the reliability of his mother's narratives. Even the neighbors, previously idle observers, began noticing small, innocuous oddities I highlighted: late-night visits, furtive phone calls, nervous pacing. Marcy's panic became almost tangible. One evening, she stormed into the study, tossing a stack of papers across my desk. "Dad! You're going to ruin everything. You don't understand the consequences." I leaned back in my chair, calm, sipping my coffee. "Consequences? Marcy. I think the consequences will speak for themselves." Her face twisted in frustration, and she revealed more than she intended: plans, manipulations, even instructions she'd given Alex that were meant to stay secret. I quietly documented it all. Every word, every slip, every trace of her unraveling ego would be ammunition for the final stages. Alex, silently observing, finally began acting. He started leaving small, careful notes, just enough for me to see, that contradicted Marcy's narrative. A text here, a journal entry there, signaling that he was starting to reclaim his own voice. And the boy wasn't subtle. His courage was quiet, patient, deliberate, much like mine had been all these years. That night, I stood in the garage, staring at the Mustang. The shadows stretched long and thin across the floorboards, creaking with the weight of anticipation. I realized how perfect the timing was. Marcy's own impatience and hubris were driving her toward the trap I had designed. She didn't even realize she was walking straight into it. And me? I was the ghost in the machine. Invisible, silent, untouchable. I didn't need to yell or threaten. I just needed to wait. Observe. Pull the strings at exactly the right moment. The storm was coming. And when it hit, nothing in that house, or in their carefully constructed world, would ever be the same. Marcy's panic reached its apex that week. You could see it in the little things: her hands trembling over her coffee cup, the way she avoided eye contact, the nervous tapping of her foot during calls. Every slip, every misstep, was music to my ears. But I didn't rush. Calm is a weapon. Patience is a weapon. And I had both in spades. I began subtly letting the outside world in on her inconsistencies. A carefully timed phone call to Alex's school counselor planted doubts about her reliability. A casual conversation with the insurance adjuster nudged them to double-check her statements. And my lawyer, my lawyer, was quietly building a paper trail that would make her scramble. Alex, quietly learning from my patience, was beginning to act on his own, sending notes, quietly contradicting her story, giving me the perfect cover to expose the cracks in her narrative. He was becoming my secret ally, and it warmed something inside me that I thought was long gone: hope. Then came the first legal confrontation. Marcy, armed with arrogance and overconfidence, arrived at the lawyer's office, convinced she was in control. She was wrong. Every document she brought, every argument she made, was countered by calm facts and meticulous records I had prepared in advance. When she realized she'd been outmaneuvered, I noticed her subtle breakdown: the forced smile, the quick glances at Alex, the flicker of panic in her eyes. She was losing control, and she didn't even know it yet. Later, at home, I sat with Alex in the garage, Mustang silent behind us, the shadows stretching long and thin across the floor. "You did well today," I said softly. "Sometimes, the hardest thing is just being patient and letting people reveal themselves." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I think I understand now." Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, like applause from the universe itself. The house was quiet, but the tension was thick, palpable, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. I knew Marcy's unraveling wasn't complete, but the first wave had already hit. And when the second came, the consequences would be far more devastating, and far more satisfying. It all came to a head on a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind where the light through the windows feels weak and conspiratorial. Marcy stormed into the lawyer's office, her confidence a brittle mask. She was sure she could browbeat the staff, intimidate the witnesses, and spin the narrative her way. She didn't account for me, or for patience. I arrived quietly, unassuming, as if I were just another old man attending routine paperwork. But I had every file, every timestamp, every recorded slip of hers neatly stacked in front of me. And when the meeting began, the first cracks in her carefully built facade appeared. I started with the simplest facts: dates, times, GPS coordinates. Then came the emails, texts, and recordings, meticulously annotated. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to use Alex as a pawn laid bare. Marcy's face went pale. First shock, then frustration, then panic. "Dad! This isn't fair," she sputtered. But no one was listening to her. The lawyers, the mediator, even the neutral observers were reviewing the evidence I had assembled. It wasn't subjective. It was indisputable. Alex, sitting quietly, finally spoke up. His voice firm, but calm. "Mom. I wasn't the only one. You were telling me what to say, how to act. I didn't feel right, but I was scared." The room went silent. Marcy's eyes darted between us, realizing the betrayal came not from me, but from her own overreach. The little puppet she tried to control was now standing on his own, revealing the truth she had tried to bury. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I just sat back, the calmest I'd been in weeks. Every move had led to this moment, exposure. Truth as a weapon, wielded with patience and precision. By the end of the meeting, the legal and bureaucratic wheels had begun to turn. Marcy was forced to acknowledge the inconsistencies, correct statements, and face the consequences of her manipulations. Alex was no longer a pawn. And I felt a quiet satisfaction that ran deeper than any fleeting victory. Outside, the wind rattled the office windows, almost theatrically, like the universe punctuating the moment. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small, private smile. The storm had hit. And it had hit with devastating precision. The days after the legal showdown were strange. The house felt quieter, but in a different way, like the air had been cleared of something toxic. Marcy moved around cautiously, as if the floor itself might betray her. Every glance she cast was measured, every word carefully chosen. She had lost her grip, and she knew it. Alex, on the other hand, began to breathe a little easier. He didn't say much at first, but I could see it in the way he carried himself, the small nods of acknowledgement, the quiet confidence of a boy who had finally reclaimed his voice. I spent time with him in the garage, the Mustang sitting silently behind us. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and old leather, a comfort in its familiarity. "You did the right thing, Alex," I said quietly. "Sometimes being brave isn't loud. Sometimes it's just speaking the truth, even when it scares you." He nodded, a small, hesitant smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I think I understand now. About Mom. About everything." Meanwhile, Marcy's overreach had consequences beyond the legal sphere. Friends and relatives, previously kept at a distance by her facade, began noticing the cracks. Gossip spread quietly but inevitably. Her reputation, once carefully curated, was now vulnerable. She had underestimated both me and the subtleties of observation, and the fallout was subtle but relentless. And me? I felt a strange peace. Not triumph, exactly, it was more the satisfaction of having navigated the storm, of having protected Alex from being consumed by someone else's manipulations, and of seeing truth prevail. But there was still one final move to make. One last piece of poetic justice that would ensure this chapter of deceit was closed properly. And I knew exactly how to do it. Outside, the wind whispered through the old windows, like a prelude. The stage was set for the final act. It was a quiet Sunday morning, deceptively calm. The kind of day where even the wind seems to pause, holding its breath for what's about to unfold. I stood in the garage, Mustang gleaming faintly in the soft light, and I knew it was time. Time to finish the game I had begun months ago. Marcy was in the kitchen, trying desperately to maintain her composure, hovering over a stack of documents she thought were safe. Alex, now quiet, composed, was nearby, watching carefully, fully aware for the first time of the web of deceit around him. I started with subtlety, just a few innocuous questions about paperwork, a carefully worded remark about evidence, a soft mention of witnesses she had overlooked. Each comment was a nudge, a calculated push, forcing her to reveal more of herself than she intended. And reveal she did. A slip of the tongue about an offhand bribe, a plan to alter a record, an admitted lie, all caught in the open, all witnessed by Alex. I didn't need to shout or argue, the truth spoke for itself. Then came the poetic justice. I had prepared a small package for the insurance company, the legal team, and neutral authorities, a complete timeline of Marcy's manipulations, her instructions to Alex, and the shadowy influences she had tried to conceal. It was undeniable, irrefutable. The moment it arrived, her control evaporated. Alex stepped forward, calm but firm. "Mom, you tried to use me. I won't do that anymore. I won't lie for you." Her face went pale. Panic, realization, and shame all rolled across her features. The daughter who had tried to orchestrate my downfall now faced the consequences of her own overreach. And Alex? Free, clear-eyed, finally his own person. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence, the weight of truth, the fall of her carefully constructed facade, that was enough. I felt a quiet satisfaction, deep and resonant, unlike anything I had experienced before. The Mustang stood silently behind me, a symbol of beginnings and endings. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, soft but insistent, like a final applause. And as I watched Alex step into his own future, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think for a long time: patience, clarity, and a keen understanding of human nature can outmaneuver even the cleverest schemes. The storm had passed. The manipulators were exposed. And in the quiet aftermath, there was a sense of balance restored, fragile but undeniable. The house was peaceful. For the first time in months, it was truly mine again. The game was over. And I had won.